Get out of the car, now! What the hell do you think you're doing in this area at this hour? The voice roared like a sudden thunderclap, tearing apart the velvet curtain of the quiet suburban night. It came from behind, amplified by the patrol car's speaker system, turning the steady raindrops on the roof of the old sedan into a faint, meaningless background noise. Inside the car, the red and blue lights from the rearview mirror swept back and forth, flashing crazily, turning the face of the man behind the wheel into a stereoscopic painting that constantly shifted between two ghostly colors. For most people, this would be a moment of pure panic, adrenaline pounding their hearts and making their breathing quicken. But the man, Marcus Thorne, let out a small sigh, a sigh that held decades of weariness. His hands, the long fingers and prominent knuckles of someone who had spent a lifetime leafing through thick legal books, remained on the worn leather steering wheel. He wasn't scared. He was just bored. Ever wonder what happens when an unstoppable force meets an immovable object? Tonight, on the damp old Gulf, lined with Gladwin's million-dollar mansions, that question is about to be answered. But who is the force? And who is the object? Is the man in the old tweed jacket? The old horn-rimmed glasses? The car that's probably worth less than the tires on the cars parked in the nearby garages? Really the underdog in this confrontation? And is the hulking, arrogant cop with the Glock lurking on his hip really as powerful as he thinks he is? Let's take a look at the whole story. Marcus glanced at the rearview mirror. The officer's large figure was approaching. There was a swagger to his gait, the cockiness of a predator who had cornered his prey. His hand was on his holster, a habit trained more to intimidation than defense. A few steps behind him was another officer, younger, smaller in stature, walking with a more reserved and uncertain gait. Marcus recognized this contrast immediately. A leader and a follower, a pack leader and a pack cub. His car, a 1998 Lexus LS400, was a relic, a living memento. It was the first luxury car he could afford after years of hard work at a prestigious law firm, before he devoted his life to public service. He kept it not because he lacked the money to buy a new car, but because of the memories it brought, the familiar feel of the leather seats that hugged his shape, the quiet sound of the engine that still whispered of an ambitious youth. But he knew that in the eyes of some, this car, combined with the color of his skin, created an equation that was incompatible with Gladwin's wealthy background at midnight. It created the right cause. Just half an hour ago, he had been sitting in the cozy study of his best friend, Richard Sterling, a retired history professor. They had shared a bottle of fine red wine, played a few games of chess, and had a lively discussion about the fall of the Roman Republic, comparing it to the political rifts of modern times. It had been an evening of wit and camaraderie. Now he was in a completely different world, one defined by suspicion and hostility. Car window was wrapped with the knuckles of a leather glove. Thump, thump, thump. A demanding, impatient, defiant sound. Marcus slowly pressed the button to lower the window. Cold air and the damp, rainy smell of earth and rotting leaves rushed into the car, bringing with it the harsh reality. Officer Frank Miller's face appeared, flushed under the red and blue lights, the veins visible on his cheeks. His small, narrow eyes scanned Marcus, then the interior of the car. His gaze lingered on the tweed jacket, the horn-rimmed glasses, and finally his calm face. A slow sneer curled his lips, as if he had confirmed some preconceived notion. "Know why I blocked you, buddy?" Miller asked, the word buddy drawn out, dripping with sarcasm and condescension. Marcus didn't answer right away. He just looked Miller straight in the eye, an unflinching stare that had made the toughest lawyers flinch in the courtroom. "Good evening, officer. Is there a problem?" "What's the problem?" Miller repeated, his voice rising artificially, like he was imitating a child. He pointed to the back of the car. Your right taillight is cracked. That's a violation. But that's not the main problem. The main problem is you. You're wandering around a wealthy neighborhood in the middle of the night, driving a beat-up car. You don't look like you belong here. That's enough of a problem for me. What are you doing here? Visiting someone? The questions came out like a machine gun, not to seek information, but to accuse. I just left a friend's house, Marcus replied, his voice low and even, without a ripple. I'm on my way home. I don't live far from here. A friend? Miller sneered. Who would be your friend in this neighborhood? Give me the name and address of that friend. This was a clear intrusion. Marcus knew he had no obligation to respond. Officer, that is personal information. I believe you have no right to request it for a minor traffic violation. That legal and correct answer only added fuel to the fire. Oh, you don't want to cooperate? That makes you even more suspicious. Give me your license and vehicle registration. Hurry! And don't do anything stupid. Marcus, deliberately slow to avoid any misunderstanding, reached into the glove compartment and pulled out an old brown leather wallet and a neatly clipped set of car papers. He carefully pulled out his driver's license and registration and handed them out the window. Miller snatched them away. He turned on the heavy maglite flashlight and shined it on the papers. There was a long silence, broken only by the rain and the steady hum of the police car, like a waiting beast. Miller frowned. He read the name over and over again. Marcus Aurelius Thorne. It was a name that rang true. He glanced at the address. A prestigious street in Villanova, another wealthy suburb. It was all so damned legal. It didn't fit the story he'd concocted in his head. Marcus Aurelius Thorne, Miller said aloud, as if it were a farcical joke. Your parents must have been good readers, huh? Or did you just make that up to sound cool? He shined the flashlight in Marcus's face. So, Marcus, what do you do for a living in Villanova? I'm guessing it's not cleaning streets. The young officer standing behind Miller, David Chen, felt a shiver run down his spine. He was a second-generation Asian American whose parents had worked hard to put him through college and then the police academy. He had joined the force with the idea of protecting and serving, but what was unfolding before him wasn't service. It was harassment. He looked at the man in the car. He didn't look like a criminal. He looked knowledgeable, calm, like one of the professors at the university he'd attended. Something was very wrong here. I work for the government, Marcus replied simply, without further explanation. He knew that any information he gave would be twisted and used against him. Government? Miller sneered, a short, unpleasant laugh coming from his throat. What kind of government? Postal worker? City hall cleaner? Or are you one of those welfare bums? Marcus ignored the insults. Officer, are my papers in order? If there are no other problems, may I go now? It's getting late. Marcus's calm seemed to infuriate Miller the most. He was used to people being scared, pleading, or reacting angrily. This calmness, to him, was a form of defiance. He tossed the license and registration into Marcus's lap. Valid, but I still don't believe you. Something's not right here. He stared at Marcus, his eyes searching for a sign of deception. Get out of the car. This was the defining moment, the line between an unpleasant traffic stop and a flagrant abuse of power. Marcus knew the law like the back of his hand. He had spent his life studying it, interpreting it, and applying it. With all due respect, officer, Marcus said, his voice still calm but now with a steely edge. You have no reasonable cause to ask me to exit the vehicle. Under the Supreme Court's decision in Pennsylvania v. Mims, You may ask me to exit for the officer's safety during a lawful traffic stop, but you have no basis for a further search without reasonable suspicion. And under Terry v. Ohio, any search must be based on a reasonable and well-founded suspicion that I am armed and dangerous. I believe I have not exhibited any signs that I am armed or dangerous. A crack in a taillight is not a reasonable suspicion of criminal activity. Silence filled the small space between the two men. Officer Chen stood behind Miller, eyes wide with amazement. He had never heard a civilian cite case law so clearly and precisely during a traffic stop. It took him a second to recall the content of those cases from his time in the academy. But for Miller, it wasn't a legal lecture. It was a direct challenge to his authority, to his ego. A fire of anger flared in his eyes, turning them into two red-hot coals. Oh, so we have a street lawyer here. You think you've read a few books and you're smarter than me, huh? You dare teach me the law on my street? Let me show you what the law is. Without waiting for an answer, Miller yanked the latch. There was a dry click. He threw open the door and grabbed Marcus's tweed-covered arms. I said, "Get out of the car!" The man's strength was overwhelming. Marcus did not struggle in vain. He let Miller drag him out of the warm driver's seat and out into the cold, damp October night. Raindrops immediately fell on his glasses, blurring the distant streetlights. Miller, larger and stronger, pushed him against the side of the car without hesitation. A sharp pain shot up Marcus's shoulder as it hit the cold metal. His face was almost pressed against the still wet window. "Stand still! Hands on the roof! Now!" Miller roared, his voice hoarse with anger. He pulled out a pair of shiny metal handcuffs. "Officer," Marcus said, his voice no longer calm but with a warning coldness that trial lawyers have learned to be wary of. "You are crossing a line from which you will not be able to return. I strongly advise you to think carefully about your next move." "Shut up," Miller hissed. And the metal clicked as the cold handcuffs tightened around Marcus's wrists. Miller deliberately tightened them more than necessary, causing the metal to cut into his flesh, causing a sharp, dull pain. "You have the right to remain silent. I advise you to use it now." He began a rough search of Marcus, patting his jacket pockets, his sides, his legs. His hands were searching not just for weapons, but for an invasion, an assertion of authority. Officer Chen stood there, frozen as a statue. He knew this was wrong, completely wrong. Procedure had been abandoned. Basic respect had been lost. He looked at the camera on Miller's chest, hoping it was recording everything, every word, every action. It was his only witness, because he was too cowardly to be a witness himself. In Marcus's inside coat pocket, Miller's hand touched something thick and soft. A wallet. He pulled it out, opened it wide. His eyes lit up like a hungry animal finding a tasty morsel of green bills. He quickly pulled the bills out, thumbing them over to count. 1, 2, 3, 19, $200 bills, $2,000 in total. The cash he'd just won in a friendly poker game at Richard's house. A triumphant, vicious smile spread across Miller's lips. He had found what he wanted, confirmation of his preconceived notions. "Aha, I knew it. I knew it was fishy." He turned to Chen, holding up the wad of bills like a trophy, his voice full of smugness. "See, Chen, this is the real reason. Drug money. No real government official would carry that much cash around. This is how they operate. Money laundering, transactions." While Miller was absorbed in his speech, Marcus remained silent. But his eyes, sharp and focused, followed his every move. He saw Miller deftly separate the wad of bills from his wallet, and instead of placing it in the evidence bag as was the norm, he stuffed it into the left breast pocket of his uniform, close to his heart. The empty leather wallet was tossed contemptuously back onto the roof of the car, next to Marcus's cuffed hands. I'm going to confiscate this money as evidence, Miller declared smugly, though his actions suggested otherwise. And you, my friend, get a free ride to the police station. We'll see how long you can keep your mouth shut in a cell with your new friends. Marcus took a deep breath. The cold air made his chest ache. Not from fear, but from a deep sadness. Sadness for this man, who had let hate and prejudice blind him to the point of no longer knowing right from wrong. Sadness for the system he had devoted his life to, a system that was great in theory, but sometimes corrupted and rotten from within by the very people entrusted to protect it. But the sadness passed quickly, replaced by a cold, steely determination. The game had gone far enough. All the evidence had been gathered. All the lines had been crossed. It was time to bring the curtain down. "Officer Miller," Marcus said, his voice clear and decisive in the rainy night. No longer a warning, but a declaration. "Your badge number is 714, Lower Merion Police Department, correct?" Miller, enjoying his moment of victory, was a little surprised by the change in the prisoner's tone. "So what? You want to write a letter of complaint?" "I want you to know, and I want your camera to record." Marcus continued, each word rolling like a hammer blow from a judge. "You have just committed an unlawful, unreasonable arrest. You have assaulted me by pushing me into the car and handcuffing me too tightly, causing injury. And you have just committed the theft of my personal property, $2,000, under the pretense of law enforcement, an act that constitutes the crime of taking private property under color of law." Miller laughed, a forced, contemptuous laugh. "You're a playwright. You sound good. You can say whatever you want. You can sue me if you like. But tonight, it's going to be the word of a respected cop with 15 years of experience against the word of a suspect like you caught with $2,000 in unaccounted cash. Guess who the judge will believe?" "Oh, I think I have a pretty good idea of who the judge will believe," Marcus replied, a mysterious glint in his eyes behind his rain-soaked glasses. "Now, by my right, I would like to make a phone call." Miller's arrogance was at its peak. He felt invincible, king of this tiny kingdom on the wet asphalt. "Fine. Why not? Let's make this play more interesting." He took Marcus's phone from his jacket pocket, his dirty thumb swiping across the screen. "Who do you want to call? Your mother? Your fucking lawyer? Tell me the number. I'll dial it for you, since your hands are full." He laughed at his own joke. Marcus, without hesitation, recited a 10-digit phone number, a number he had memorized long ago. Miller, with a look of sadistic pleasure, dialed the number and pressed the speakerphone button, wanting both his colleagues and this prisoner to witness the complete collapse. The phone rang once, then a second time. Then a voice came through, strong, curt, and decisive, the voice of someone who was used to giving orders and had no time for nonsense. "Sterling, listen." Marcus's entire demeanor seemed to change. The sternness was gone, replaced by a professional, level demeanor. "Bob, it's Marcus. Sorry to call you at this hour." On the other end of the line, just a moment. But in that moment, the man named Sterling's tone changed completely. The business-like curtness was gone, replaced by personal concern, almost concern. His voice was warmer. "Marcus, what's wrong? Are you okay? You never call this number unless it's an emergency. That doesn't sound right." "I'm fine, Bob. Thanks for asking. But I'm having a little trouble," Marcus said, his voice even, recounting the events as an objective report. "I'm on Old Gulf Road in Gladwine. I was pulled over by a Lower Merion Police Department officer, Frank Miller, badge number 714. I'm currently handcuffed, standing in the rain. He also just confiscated $2,000 in cash from me. calling it illegal, after accusing me of not belonging to this neighborhood." The silence on the other end of the line lasted for 3 seconds. Those 3 seconds felt like an eternity. During those 3 seconds, Officer Miller was still smiling, a smile that was starting to waver. He didn't understand. Why was the powerful man on the other end of the line showing concern for someone like this? But then, the sound coming from the phone wiped that smile away and replaced it with utter horror. "What?" It wasn't a question. It was a roar. A roar of challenged power, of pure, suppressed anger. Sterling's voice thundered into Miller's eardrums, forcing him to take a reflexive step back. "Marcus, what are you talking about? Did he hurt you? Give that officer the phone right now. Hear that? Give him the phone now!" Miller's face changed, from the red of anger. It turned white with fear, then ashen. Cold sweat began to break out on his forehead, mixing with the rain. He stuttered, looking at the phone as if it were a cobra rearing its head. Who are you?" "I'm Robert Sterling, Attorney General of the state of Pennsylvania," the voice shouted from the phone, so loud that Officer Chen, standing a few feet away, jumped back. "And the man you just assaulted, handcuffed, and robbed is Federal Judge Marcus Aurelius Thorne. Do you understand what you've just done, you fucking idiot?" Judge, Federal, Marcus Aurelius Thorne. The words were like invisible bullets, piercing through Miller's armor of pride, prejudice, and ignorance, piercing his cowering consciousness. He hadn't just angered a bear. He'd walked into a cave and kicked a hibernating bear in the face. The phone fell from Miller's numb hand, hitting the wet asphalt with a soft click. But to his ears, it sounded like the collapse of his world, his career, his life. He looked up at the handcuffed man he had treated like trash just minutes before. Judge Thorne's calm face did not change, but in his eyes, Miller no longer saw resignation. He saw cold, solemn, unwavering judgment. He saw the light of justice, and it consumed him. Time seemed to stand still. Officer Chen stood there, mouth agape, feeling as if the ground beneath him had fallen away. Attorney General, Federal Judge, titles he had only heard of in books, news reports, and formal training sessions, now standing on this dark patrol street, in the worst possible light. He looked at Miller, the colleague he both feared and despised, and saw a man falling apart before his eyes. Miller trembled. He bent down to pick up the phone, then fumbled and dropped it again. He finally picked it up, holding it out to Thorne like a sacrificial offering. He turned to Thorne, his face contorted in a mixture of horror and pathetic pleading. Judge? Oh, God. Sir, I don't know. I'm sorry." He stammered, the words falling apart. He hurriedly pulled the handcuff key from his belt, his hand shaking so much he couldn't get it into the lock after 2 tries. Let me get this off for you. It's been a misunderstanding. A terrible misunderstanding. I swear to God." Thorne took a slight step back, keeping Miller from touching him. "No. Officer Miller." Judge Thorne's voice was icy but authoritative. "Let's leave it at that. We've come too far to call this a misunderstanding. This was a series of bad decisions on your part, based on prejudice. Now, we'll go through the proper procedure." The words left Miller numb. He knew he was finished. Not just reprimanded, not just suspended. This was the end of his career, of his freedom, of everything. And then it came. At first, a distant echo in the rainy night. It quickly grew into a deafening, chaotic cacophony. Sirens, not one but several. They were coming from both directions, their red and blue lights turning the quiet suburban street into a war zone, illuminating terrified faces and bare trees. In less than 10 minutes, the road was completely blocked off. 4 county police cruisers, 2 unmarked black Ford Crown Victoria sedans from the Attorney General's office, and another black Chevrolet Tahoe from the Internal Affairs Bureau. The doors swung open almost simultaneously, and men in suits and uniforms poured out, moving with a professional, urgent air. A tall, gray-haired man wearing an expensive Burberry trench coat stepped out of one of the sedans. His face was murderous. It was Attorney General Robert Sterling. He was followed by the Lower Marion County Sheriff, a portly man named Johnson, his face as white as a sheet, sweat beading on his forehead despite the cold. Sterling didn't bother to look at Miller. His eyes went straight to his friend, who was still standing patiently, his hands cuffed behind his back, looking strangely calm in the midst of the chaos. Sterling walked quickly over, his eyes showing relief at Thorne's uninjured state, but quickly turning to rage when he saw the dark red marks on his friend's wrists. "Marcus, are you okay?" Sterling asked, his voice low and worried. "I'm fine, Bob, just a little wet," Thorne replied, a barely perceptible smile flickering across his lips. Sheriff Johnson rushed over, shaking like a leaf in the wind. "Judge Thorne! Oh my God! Judge Thorne! I am so sorry. I can't believe this happened in my precinct. I will—" Sterling raised his hand, a small but powerful gesture that cut off the sheriff. "Take care of your men first, Johnson." His icy gaze finally settled on Miller, who stood cowering like a child caught in an arson attack. "Officer Frank Miller," Sterling said, his voice low, but with such authority that it drowned out all else. "Do you know that the man you just pointed your gun at, the man you just handcuffed, is one of the most respected judges on the Third Circuit Court of Appeals? This man has written legal opinions that have shaped the laws of this state for the past 2 decades. He's the man who's kept people like you accountable. And you." Sterling took a step forward. "Call him bro and take his money?" Miller began to sob, tears mixing with the rain running down his face, contorted with fear. "Mr. Attorney General, I made a terrible mistake. I had a bad day. I have a family, a mortgage. My child is sick. Please, have mercy." "Mercy?" Sterling sneered, a smile devoid of any mirth, only utter contempt. "Did you show any mercy when you pushed a 60-year-old citizen into the side of a car in the rain? Did you think about the family and collateral of those you may have wrongfully detained in the past? Mercy is a privilege, Miller, not a right. And tonight, you forfeited that privilege." Sterling turned to 2 plainclothes internal affairs agents. "Gentlemen, arrest Officer Miller on federal charges of false imprisonment, assault, theft of property, and civil rights violations." 2 investigators approached. One read Miller his Miranda rights, his voice flat and mechanical, a strange contrast to the emotional turmoil of the officer about to be arrested. The other produced a new pair of handcuffs and, with a professional motion, locked Miller's hands in place. The click of these cuffs was different, the sound of justice, not abuse. "Wait," Sterling said. "Check his pockets." An investigator reached into Miller's uniform pocket and pulled out a wad of $2,000 bills, now slightly damp. He held it up. $2,000 in cash, sir." "Sealed it as evidence," Sterling ordered. "Along with the body cam tape. I want everything. Every frame. Every sound." As Miller was being escorted away, Sheriff Johnson rushed to unlock Judge Thorne's handcuffs, this time inserting the correct key. "Judge, once again, I sincerely apologize. Officer Miller's behavior was unacceptable and an affront to all who wear this uniform. He will be terminated immediately and will face all legal consequences. Thorne rubbed his red wrists, feeling the blood begin to circulate again. He watched Miller's back as he was ushered into the back of an unmarked car. There was no gloating in his eyes, only a deep sadness and an endless weariness. "It was not a mistake, Sheriff," Thorne said softly, but his words carried the weight of 1,000 judgments. It was a choice. He chose to let his prejudices rule his actions. He chose to abuse the power you gave him. And every choice has consequences. Sterling draped a dry jacket over his friend's shoulders. "Come on, Marcus. I'll take you home." As they walked toward the Attorney General's sedan, Officer Chen stood beside the patrol car, looking small and out of place among the powerful men. Thorne paused, turning to look at the young man, who avoided his gaze. "Officer Chen," Thorne said, his voice not harsh, but rather gentle. Chen startled, raising his head. "Yes. Judge? You saw something bad tonight. You were in a difficult situation," Thorne said, acknowledging the complexity of the situation. "But you also have an opportunity to decide what kind of cop you want to be. Remember how you feel right now. That insecurity, that discomfort, that shame. That is your moral compass. Never let it become numb. Never lose it. In the days to come, people will ask you what happened. Tell the truth. The whole truth. That is the most important thing you can do right now. For me. For you. And for the badge you wear." Chen nodded, tears welling up in his eyes. Gratitude and shame mixed together. "Yes, sir. I will. I'm sorry." "Don't apologize to me," Thorne said. "Behave yourself. That's the best apology." The rain had mostly stopped. The air was fresher and cleaner, as the Attorney General's car rolled smoothly away, leaving behind the flashing lights and the ruined career of a man. Thorne looked out the window. The great houses of Gladwin lay dark, their owners sleeping peacefully in their warm beds, unaware of the drama of justice and injustice that had just unfolded on their doorsteps. "You know, Bob," Thorne said, his voice low, breaking the silence in the car. "What worries me, what really scares me, isn't what he did to me. I have status. I have a voice. I have you to call. I can protect myself. I can protect." He paused, looking at the droplets of water still on the glass, each reflecting a distant streetlight. "What keeps me up at night is the thought of how many times he, and others like him, have done this to people who don't have it. A black mechanic on his way home from a late shift. A Latina college student driving her family's beat-up old car. An immigrant recently arrived in this country, barely speaking English. People for whom a wrongful arrest, a ridiculous fine, or a night in jail can turn their lives upside down. They can lose their job, their home, their faith in everything. People whose words don't matter when faced with a badge and a lie." Sterling nodded, his face hardening, the lines around his eyes deepening. "That's why we fight, Marcus. Every day, in courtrooms, in law offices, and on streets like this one. That's why cases like this must be handled with the utmost seriousness. Not just to punish the guilty, but to send a message to everyone else. That the badge is a symbol of trust, a burden of responsibility, not a license to abuse and indulge the vilest prejudices." The story of Officer Frank Miller ended badly. He was fired, charged with a slew of crimes, with Officer Chen's honest and detailed testimony, along with the undeniable body camera footage. He was convicted and sent to prison. His career, his reputation, all went up in smoke in one rainy night because of his own arrogance and hatred. But this story is not just about one man's downfall. It is about the power of calm before the storm, of principled steadfastness in the face of absurdity. It affirms a simple but profound truth. No one, not a nameless man in a used car or a policeman with power in his hands, is above the law. And sometimes the brightest light of justice shines not from the solemn courtroom, but from the darkest corners of the streets, where it is most needed to dispel the darkness of injustice. Now, I want to ask you something sincerely. What do you think of Officer Miller's outcome? Was it a fitting punishment? If you were Officer Chen in that situation, would you have intervened sooner, or would you have also remained silent out of fear? What feelings or thoughts did this story leave you with about justice and power in our society?